Bonjour. Je ne sais pas quelle sera la situation mondiale quand cette vidéo sera...
I don't know what situation the world will be in when this film is finished. Will the American dollar have collapsed? Will the Eurozone have exploded? Will the failure of the big countries to pay the debts have provoked a succession of bankruptcies, starting with the banks? Very clever is the person who can already tell what form of events will occur and to what extent. But one doesn't need to be a rocket scientist to realize that the tip of this familiar iceberg is getting closer and may even have been struck if the ruling world class, in its obstinate blindness, doesn't change direction. The aim of this video is neither to make more or less disastrous predictions, nor to indulge in yet another economical analysis of the situation. It is to simply understand the deep-rooted trouble that is causing the crisis that we are currently enduring. If we can understand the root of the problem, then we will be able to find well-adapted solutions. This is what this video should help us to do.
Prenons une image. Imaginons une personne
So where do we
qui serait née
stand?
en prison.
Well, imagine someone who was born in prison. Now is that person about 50, still behind bars, with no hope of getting out. Is it necessary to say that, in spite of his situation, he has never stopped dreaming of freedom? He would have memorized images accumulated through years of reading, and spent hours imagining how his life would be if one day, by some miracle, he was free. Now, believe it or not, that person was, in actual fact, free. One day, some years before, the doors of the prison had been unlocked without a sound and without a word to the prisoner. Would he from time to time check to know if the door was unlocked just in case? Of course not. Why would he when he had always been told that he would never be freed? So there he was, tossing and turning in his cell, or with his nose against the window, dreaming of an inaccessible world when all he had to do was push the door. Ironic, isn't it? And yet, would you believe it, that prisoner is us. It is us because we are hitting our heads on the walls of an invisible prison. All the crises that we're currently enduring have very real consequences, but the causes are nowhere accidental. They are the result of the mental prison we put ourselves in. What is the nature of this prison? It is the image that we have of money. And when was the prison doors unlocked? On the 15th of August, 1971. Am I saying that the world of sufficiency for all, the world of peace, the world of equity that is deep in our hearts, we all dream of is actually here, close to hand? Yes, I'm indeed affirming that very thing. All we need to do is understand what money actually is and explore its new horizons opened by its liberation, the one that happened on the 15th August 1971, but we turn against us because we didn't realize how important it was. Even if we know that is not really the case, our collective consciousness is ruled by the belief that A. The money we use every day has its own counterpart in gold somewhere in a bank or state safe. B. As we think it to be related to gold, we believe that it physically exists, that it has its own value, and that it is rare. We consider it to be like a cake with a limited size for which the only question that needs to be asked is, how do we share it? And as it is rare, naturally not everyone can have access to it. Of course, we deplore it, but we accept it. And so the money goes to the most worthy. The most worthy, in this case, meaning the most cunning, who in turn distribute it as they see fit, according to their rules in salaries and charities. And at last, C, when we run out of money, it's only natural that we have no other choice but to borrow from those who have it at a legitimate interest rate. This is therefore the image we have. However, the reality is altogether different. To touch the reality of the situation, We must understand the true nature of money. If we don't, we will only transfer problems and never solve them. You'll notice that the question of the nature of money is always put aside, or to be more precise, it is confused with its functions, rather like defining human nature by human actions. Like a coin, it has two faces. Here are two stories to illustrate them. Let's start with the tale side. We are in a small village somewhere in Quebec. In this village, the Calèche Inn stands proudly in place opposite the station. It's the place where the villagers like to meet up and gossip, comment on current affairs, and generally have a good time amongst friends. This particular morning, a lady enters.
Bonjour.
Oh, bonjour, madame. Vous allez bien?
Très bien, merci. Pourrais-je réserver une chambre pour ce soir? Je suis venue dans la région régler 2-3 affaires et j'ai aucune idée du temps que ça va prendre. Alors, comme j'ai peur de manquer le dernier train, je préférais avoir une chambre au cas où.
Inquiétez-vous pas, on est là pour ça, chère dame. OK, je vous réserve une chambre. Je vois que vous n'avez pas de bagages. Alors, ce sera 50 $, s'il vous plaît.
Certainement. Excusez la déchirure, je l'ai réparée avec un peu de papier collant.
Pas de problème, chère dame. Ça fait tout autant l'affaire.
Parfait, alors, à ce soir.
À tantôt.
Elisabeth.
Oh, qu'est-ce que je peux faire pour toi, mon boulanger préféré?
Eh bien, je te rappelle que t'as toujours pas payé le gâteau que j'ai fait pour ta fille l'autre jour pour son anniversaire.
Oh.
50 $, justement. Alors, le beau billet que t'as là serait tout aussi bien dans ma caisse.
Hey, tu fais bien de me le rappeler, hein? Je suis désolée, j'avais complètement oublié ça.
Eh bien, c'est pas tout ça. J'ai du pain sur la planche. Alors, je retourne à mes fourneaux. Bonne journée.
Bonjour, bonjour!
Bonjour, comment vas-tu ce matin?
Ça va bien. J'arrive de prendre mon petit café puis je retourne à ma boutique. Mais j'y pense, je vous dois encore ma dernière visite. Hein? Oui. C'était combien?
C'est pour quel soin?
Ah, ben, c'est pour une réparation d'un plombage.
C'est 50 $.
Ben justement. Voilà.
Ben merci beaucoup.
Hey, bonne
Puis,
journée.
ben, bonne journée à toi, puis je dirai à ma secrétaire que c'est réglé.
Excellent, merci.
Bonne journée.
Au revoir.
Sylvie? À quelle heure mon prochain rendez-vous? J'ai un peu de temps de libre. Je vais en profiter, puis je vais aller payer mon garagiste. J'en aurai pas pour très longtemps. À tout à l'heure.
Alors, satisfait de la dernière commande que j'ai faite pour toi, Gilles?
Très satisfait.
Bon savon?
Oui.
Excellent.
Bonjour, Gilles.
Bonjour, quel bon vent t'amène? Un problème avec ta voiture?
Un vent que tu vas aimer. Je m'en viens régler ce que je te dois.
Ah oui?
Je pense que c'était 50 $.
C'était juste une vidange, hein?
Oui, juste une vidange.
Ben, c'est parfait.
50 $.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
À la prochaine.
À la prochaine.
Bye. Mon cher Dominique, ça tombe bien. Je te devais 50 $ pour le savon liquide que tu m'as livré l'autre jour.
Oui, 50 $ bien juste. Merci, ça tombe très bien.
Et voilà.
Bon, où j'en suis rendu? Prochain rendez-vous, peut-être un peu trop loin. J'aurais pas le temps de me rendre. Peut-être passer la nuit ici. Ouais, c'est une bonne chose. Je repartirai tôt demain matin.
Pourquoi pas?
Hein?
Va à la calèche. C'est la meilleure place dans le coin. En plus, ils sont pas chers.
Ouais, j'ai entendu parler de ça. Ça a l'air que c'est bien. Bon, allez, je me sauve. Même commande la semaine prochaine?
Oui, mon Dominique.
Merci, Gilles.
Merci, Dominique.
Bonjour.
Oh, bonjour, ou bonsoir plutôt.
Oui, c'est vrai. Est-ce que vous auriez une chambre de disponible?
Je suis désolée, mon pauvre monsieur, mais j'ai rien pour ce soir. L'hôtel est complet.
Non, regardez. J'ai fini plus tôt que je pensais. Et puis, j'ai tout le temps d'attraper mon dernier train. Donnez donc ma chambre à monsieur.
Ah, ben tout est réglé d'abord.
Ce sera 50 $, s'il vous plaît.
Avec plaisir. Et voilà.
Oh, je vous remercie. Voilà pour vous.
Ah, mais c'est mon billet de 50 que je vous ai remis ce matin.
Ah oui? Comment voyez-vous ça?
Ben, vous vous souvenez? Je vous avais dit qu'il était déchiré et que je l'avais réparé. Il est reconnaissable.
Mais vous êtes donc bien riche, vous, pour vous permettre de déchirer les billets de 50 $.
Aucune importance. Il était faux.
Quel enseignement tirer de...
What lesson do we learn from this first story? The debts of this small community have all been settled thanks to the false bank note. Even when they find out that the note was fake, this doesn't change the fact that the villagers are satisfied and consider themselves to have been repaid. You see, contrary to what we all think, money itself has no value. It's nothing more than ink on paper, or better yet, a few electrons on a computer screen. It merely conveys the value we give to things. And if we accept these worthless pieces of paper, it is only because we know that, in turn, others will accept them as payment. We can now logically assume that money is simply a social convention based on trust. A group of people just have to agree on a unit of account, and all the members of the group undertake to accept it in payment.
On dit toujours le plus difficile, c'est de trouver de l'argent.
People say that it's hard to find money, but it's not. Humanity has lived hundreds of millions of years without money, and the evolutionary process did not stop. Money is mere convention. Money has no value in and of itself. Its only value is the exchange value between human beings who trust each other.
We are on a small, unknown island where money does not exist. A man enters into a carpenter's house.
Hey, bonjour, Paul. Hey, salut Jean! Comment ça va? Très bien, très bien. Dis-moi, je voudrais offrir à ma fille un petit meuble de rangement pour sa chambre. J'ai dessiné ce que je voudrais sur ce bout de papier. Pourrais-tu me faire ça pour, disons, dans 2 semaines? Ouais, c'est tout à fait possible. Mais il y a un petit problème. Écoute, j'apprécie que tu viennes me voir dès que tu as besoin de travaux de menuiserie. Mais nous ne parvenons pas à équilibrer nos échanges. J'ai beau prendre à ta force tout ce dont j'ai besoin, poignées, charnières, serrures. Le trou se creuse. Tu me dois de plus en plus. C'est pas que ça me gêne de te faire des avances, mais mes besoins avec ce que tu peux m'offrir ne seront jamais comblés. Et pendant ce temps, je n'arrive même pas à changer mes souliers. Regarde. Ah oui, c'est vrai. J'ai moi aussi le même problème avec d'autres personnes. À certaines, je dois plus comme à toi, alors que d'autres me doivent plus sans que jamais on parvienne à l'équilibre. On fait tous des avances qui sont rarement compensées, de sorte que les échanges deviennent de plus en plus difficiles. Et qu'on manque de choses qui pourtant existent et sont disponibles. Tu as raison, il faut en sortir. Et si on allait voir un des membres de notre conseil des sages? Oh, c'est une très bonne idée, allons-y.
Vous tombez bien, les amis. Figurez-vous que, conscient du problème que vous venez de m'exposer, nous l'avons justement étudié. Et nous nous apprêtions à soumettre l'idée suivante aux habitants de l'île pour l'approbation, à savoir que nous allons créer un organisme collectif chargé d'émettre des reconnaissances de dettes transmissibles représentant le travail fourni mais non compensé.
Je comprends pas.
Nous avons toujours évalué notre travail au temps passé pour le faire, n'est-ce pas? Regarde, cet billet de 10 unités de temps. Qu'est-ce qui est écrit dessus?
Nous, communauté de l'île aux fleurs, reconnaissant que le porteur de ce billet a fourni un bien ou un service d'une valeur de 10 unités de temps, sans avoir rien reçu en retour. Il peut donc aller chercher dans notre communauté satisfaction de ses propres besoins à hauteur de cette valeur. Je comprends. Il me suffit de remettre à Paul les unités de temps que je lui dois, sous forme de ses billets. Il pourra alors changer tout de suite de souliers sans plus attendre, en remettant au savetier le nombre d'unités correspondant aux chaussures qu'il choisira, et ainsi de suite. Mais comment vais-je faire pour me procurer ces billets?
Tu as dit que d'autres personnes te doivent des choses pour équilibrer vos échanges et que c'est ainsi pour tout le monde sur l'île. Donc, tous les habitants vont être invités à se présenter à cet organisme avec l'indication de ce que les autres leur doivent en unité de temps, comme nous avons l'habitude de le faire. À chacun sera remise la même valeur sous forme de billets. Plus personne ne devra plus rien à personne. Et à partir de ce moment-là, vous aurez entre les mains un moyen d'échange qui vous permettra d'acquitter immédiatement ce que vous recevez en permettant aux autres d'aller chercher dans la communauté ce que vous ne savez pas ou ne pouvez pas leur fournir.
Si je comprends bien, ces billets que vous allez nous remettre sont en fait une reconnaissance de dette de la communauté en remerciement d'un travail effectué par chacun, transmissible à travers la communauté.
C'est exactement ça.
Mais comment va s'appeler cet organisme communautaire chargé d'émettre les billets?
La burette.
La burette? Ben, c'est un outil pour mettre de l'huile, ça.
Outre le fait que ce sont les initiales pour le bureau de la reconnaissance de tout le travail effectué, ne s'agit-il pas de mettre de l'huile dans le rouage grippé de nos échanges?
Qu'est-ce que la compréhension de la nature?
What does the comprehension of the nature of money highlight? Even though by nature money doesn't have its own value, the false value we give it drives mankind and its organization to consider it as primary wealth, to the point of letting its possession become their principal obsession. Think about this. If tomorrow you're a billionaire but lost in a desert, dying of thirst, you will quickly realize that wealth is in water and not in your billions. This inversion of value of things means that, due to the apparent need of money, which is a symbolic wealth, the true wealth, the one of the planet Earth, provides us with free of charge, along with the added value through human activity, is neglected. The planet is devastated and human beings reduced to slavery. Whereas, by nature, it is society that owes us money for the work we provide, which implies that society has the duty and the power to distribute the necessary quantity of money free of charge. Because of this false image, whole population are obliged to borrow money with interest in order to be paid for their own work. If the ecological and human consequences weren't so tragic, it would be laughable. Since lives are at stake, it's worthwhile to take the time to understand how we built the walls of our prison. To do this, we do have to go back in time. There was a time when currency was material made of gold and silver. It had therefore an intrinsic value and could become scarce. At that time, the materiality of currency, its value, its scarcity were some of the problems communities had to deal with. A major problem was security, as it was not easy to travel along sunken lanes and in the heart of dark forests with purses or chests filled with clattering coins. Thus, the goldsmith, the banker's predecessors, had the idea of offering the safekeeping of precious values against bills of exchange. At destination, all one had to do was to show up at a fellow goldsmith to retrieve one's values. Later the system improved, making possible the transfer of bills, so it was no longer necessary to convert them. Thus was born the principle of dual currency system, made of a real protected currency and a currency for common use which circulated, pieces of paper with no intrinsic value but accepted for payment as they can be converted into gold at any time. This principle is still in the heart of our system. The difference is that gold and silver have been replaced by the so-called central bank currency. What is central bank currency? Confidence that once resided in the value of the metal which made up currencies has been replaced with the one given by the central banks on the basis that these organizations guarantee the successful completion of banking operations. In addition, they have the monopoly of currency issue.
Thus, central money is the only legal tender.
It comes in two forms: banknotes and coins on the one hand, which is the so-called fiduciary money we use every day, and scriptural form on the other. This latter form is not available to us. It is only available to banks that pay what they owe each other with their central bank account. But as you probably know, banknotes and coins represent only 10% of our transactions. Most of our transactions are made with scriptural money, not with central bank money. This is the equivalent of the past bill of exchange. It is not currency, it is a promise of currency. When your bank statement indicates that you have, for example, 1,000 euros, dollars, yen, or other, in reality you only have the promise of the bank to obtain for you 1,000 euros, dollars, or yen in central bank currency if you ask for it and when you ask for it. Meanwhile, your account is only an empty bag which the bank commits to fill until an agreed level. The principle of dual currency settled the issue of security, but still there was a recurring problem to solve: precious metal scarcity leading to currency scarcity. Goldsmiths became bankers when they developed financial techniques to overcome this problem. Seeing that bills of exchange were circulating well and that people were not applying systematically for their conversion into gold, they had the idea of granting loans by submitting bills which were not guaranteed by a corresponding gold deposit. Did the payee think the bankers lent him his own money? Most probably. There was no reason to think otherwise. In fact, the banker's bet was to have more paper value in circulation rather than he actually had in metal value. He was relying on the fact that not everyone would ask for conversion at the same time.
Ici encore,
again, the principle of fractional reserve is at the heart of the modern monetary system. Banks are required to keep at the central bank a reserve of currency, but this reserve is well below the amount of customer deposits. The ratio requirement varies between countries. It is usually between 0 and 5%. You will therefore understand that the whole system is based on an optical illusion because banks are far from possessing in central bank currency the amount of their commitments to their customers. Let's not forget that money is a social convention based on trust. Given current practices, trust can only exist if this principle is hidden to the public because it's an element of uncertainty and instability. This is the time when the door of our jail was unlocked without our noticing it, and what should have resulted in freedom turned out to be a means of enslavement. We are in August the 15th, 1971. At that time, currencies are still linked to gold, but only through the US dollar. Why? Because at the end of World War II, 3/4 of the world gold stock are in the United States. For this reason, the Bretton Woods Agreement makes the American dollar the only convertible currency. This is what conferred to the American dollar its supremacy over all other currencies by becoming a reserve currency and the currency of international trade. In the years that followed, while dollars spread all over the world, the US gold reserve declined. In 1971, the situation of Al-Qassam, stuck in the Vietnam War, was quite different from that of 1944. The dollars in circulation were far from being guaranteed by the gold remaining in Fort Knox. Some countries, including France, no longer trusted the paper dollar and started asking for gold against the dollars they had in stock. What would happen if everyone did the same? President Richard Nixon did not wait for the answer. On August the 15th, 1971, he put an end to the convertibility of the dollar.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
La perte du dernier lien qui...
The loss of the last link that connected money to gold has sounded the death bell of the era of material money. The new era is that of dematerialized currency, virtual currency, with no value or existence of its own, the era of dead money. We need to be clear about this. The decision to cut the tie linking money to the gold scarcity should have freed the people. In fact, the result is quite the opposite. With a slow turn of the screw, a new system of slavery of money to the happy few is being applied. We are only now feeling the effects because we believe that this could only happen to poor countries. So, where's the catch? When we abandon the materiality of money, the two systems which depend directly on it, the dual currency system and the fractional reserve system, should have been abandoned too. They weren't, however, and here are the consequences. The real money which now replaces gold, although only real by general consensus, is central bank money which can only be issued by national central banks. By maintaining the principle of a fractional reserve, however, we have ensured that the quantity of real money available remains permanently below requirements, some 8 to 15 times less than needed to be precise. Given the intrinsic insufficiency of central bank money, a substitute has to be found from private resources. The bank scriptural currency, which has no official legal value, and which we have referred to above as money of common use. Remember, it's called money, it looks like money, and it works like money, but it is not money. It's just a promise to supply central bank currency on demand. But where does this bank currency come from? It can't be penned in the rivers anymore or mined from the face of the rock. If more money is needed in society, it has to be created. But how? By contracting debts to banks who behave as though they were lending us something they own.
Le processus de création monétaire...
The money creation process can be described as a simple but magical accounting operation which transforms into money something that isn't. As the economist John Kenneth Galbraith put it, the process by which banks create money is so simple the mind is repaired. Let's take an example. Meet Mr. Smith. He needs $10,000 to buy a car. His bankers examine his credential and decides he has the means to reimburse the sum together with the interest. He grants him the loan. He then enters $10,000 on the asset side of the bank's balance sheet, as he has the authority to convert the promise Mr. Smith made in the loan agreement into money. At the same time, he enters a liability of $10,000 in the bank's account, the sum the bank owes to Mr. Smith. In fact, it's a simple exchange of debts, one payable immediately and in totality by the bank so that Mr. Smith has money in his account, another to be paid back to the bank by Mr. Smith under the terms of the loan agreement. So far, there's no problem for the bank. A basic accounting operation has allowed $10,000 to be whisked out of a controller's hat. Mr. Smith next signs a check to his garage, which happens to use the same bank. Still no problem for the bank. It debits the Smith account and credits the garage account. Just another bit of bookkeeping. In reality, the only thing deposited in the Mr. Smith account and subsequently transferred to the garage account was not dollars, but an empty bag. At this point, however, the garage needs to pay a supplier's bill to an account in a different bank. Things suddenly get complicated for Mr. Smith and the garage bank. Why? Because the supplier's bank isn't interested in empty bags. It wants central bank money in the bags. Every day, you see, banks determine what they owe each other, and any debit balances are settled in central bank money. If a bank lacks the central bank money it needs on its account to pay what it owes, its only option is to borrow from other banks or from the central bank itself. You'd have realized by now, however, that the bank is mainly interested in avoiding having to pay in central bank money, which is far more costly than the empty bags it can use for free.
Maintenant,
let's try now to get a view of the whole dynamic by way of an analogy. Imagine the world as a bathtub, and imagine the money issued by the central bank as the water in the tub. The level of the water in the tub, however, is too low to meet everyone's need. In response, the private banks open up the credit tap to meet the demand, letting what is supposed to be water but isn't flow into the borrower's tank, which are the accounts. In reality, the banks merely draw a line on the side of each tank showing the amount of water they are committed to providing, leaving everyone with the illusion that the water is really there. As the bank know that it would take extraordinary happenings to make everyone want to draw their ration of water at the same time, they can afford to take the risk. What really counts is that all the water needed seems to be in the tanks, and that people believe that this is really the case. Don't forget, however, that all this theoretical water is out on loan. It therefore pours out of the tub, and what's more is subject to interest. This means that every day on the payment deadline, some of the water goes down the plug hole, and each borrower has to reimburse more than he or she actually borrowed, which means that the amount to be returned is always more than what was originally provided. What are the consequences? Let's be absolutely clear. Money equals debt. All the money currently in circulation is linked to one or another debt. No debt, no money. If all the debts were suddenly repaid, not only would there be no money left in the world, but would still be owing. Whether we like it or not, this means that we are all in conflict with each other. The money required to pay the interest on the loans was not included in the original loan. To pay off the interest, every borrower has to take the money from somebody else's pocket, and everyone else, of course, has the same problem. It creates a state of high tension, like in a game of musical chairs. The losers go bankrupt, losing all they own. If there were no means to compensate, society as a whole would be getting poorer and poorer, with a small minority getting richer and richer until the tub ran dry. Today, however, as the current crisis shows, the compensation mechanism is grinding to a halt. So, what is this mechanism that prevents the bathtub from running dry? Exponential indebtedness. Keep on borrowing. By opening up the tap even further, i.e. by stimulating the demand for credit, we manage to meet the extra demand at the plug hole and keep some water in the tub. The result, inevitably, is over-indebtedness and population in bondage. It is what we are now seeing. Public and private debt levels are currently so high that lenders are beginning to think they won't get paid. To reduce the public debt and, as they say, reassure the markets, ordinary citizens, already prey to soaring by bank charges, are being asked to pay higher taxes and to suffer measures of hardship which degrade their social services and dismantle the system of social welfare. Debt is not the result of people living beyond their means, as it is often claimed to justify the painful measures being imposed. Debt is the result of the dynamic driving the system as a whole. How could there not be debt if debt is the condition for money to exist? But it's so much easier and profitable for those reaping the benefits to blame the folk in the street, rather than admit that if money is an IOU by nature, it is an IOU from the community to its members, and not an IOU from the community to the banks.
Basically, private banks create money. There are commercial banks for the public and business banks for industry. They get to decide when to manufacture money. That's an enormous power given to private entities. Money is the blood of the economy. It's the people's right to livelihoods. The fact that the very creation of money is monopolized by private entities means that people's lives are monopolized by private entities. Because tomorrow I can decide to put faith, let's say, into oil companies or companies that produce anti-personnel mines or whatever it may be. And these decisions are made by maybe 100 bankers in New York or 20 in France, maybe fewer, 10 people.
Nous comprenons que
Seen from a personal point of view, this is not the most obvious statement. You may quite likely be saying you don't owe anybody anything. But the situation has to be seen in its globality. And it is that globality that we're trying to explain. It's society that has borrowed all the money. You, personally, may not have borrowed any money, but all the money you have was borrowed at some point in time by somebody somewhere. You might be asking yourself, why do our government persist on following a path so risky and so consistently imperfect? Well, you see, what some of us experience as errors or dysfunctions guarantees others fortune and privileges. It all depends on where you really stand. World finance is dominated on one hand by the City of London, state within a state governed solely by private banks, and on the other by Wall Street in the United States of America, where central bank, also known as the Federal Reserve, is not a public organization but a cartel of private banks. Admittedly, the Bank of France is state-run, as is the Bank of Canada. As for the Central European Bank, it belongs to the member state. And yet, to tighten things up to notch, bankers have obtained the right to make the central bank independent from political power, which in turn render them entirely dependent on private bank. You'll note that whereas independence of central bank has been claimed as a necessary bolt under the cover of healthy management, the dependence on banking interests is never mentioned. Their independence in respect to political power is far from neutral, as it places the financial power above political power, and the latest submission is clear for all to see today. Should you still have doubts, here's an excerpt from an article published on the website of the newspaper Le Monde on the 2nd January 2012, entitled, "Why Do States Pay 600 Times More Than Banks?"
An American judge recently agreed with Bloomberg journalists whom had asked their central bank to be more transparent in regards to the aid it had poured to help sustain the banking system. After having peeled through 20,000 pages of various data, Bloomberg pointed out that the Federal Reserve had secretly lent banks that were struggling the sum of $1,200 billion at the incredible low rate of 0.01%. Simultaneously, the inhabitants of numerous countries are suffering from austerity plans imposed by their governments. because financial markets won't accept to loan them a few billion at interest rates lower than 6, 7, or 9%.
Double standards, you see. When banks are having trouble, they benefit from generosity at the best rates, but in the case of states, they pay full rate. With things as they are, it's not surprising that from an ordinary citizen's point of view, the system is dysfunctional. Yet, if you see this from a bank shareholder's point of view, then it's the most effective system, as you can only win. All is good, profits go to the bank, things aren't well, the losses of other people. Heads I win, tails you lose. Imagine that we're the sole survivors of a ship sinking. In the heart of the storm, our group is split in two, each of which ends up on desert islands far off from each other. Each of these islands is vast and offers all the riches necessary to ensure material sufficiency and promote self-fulfillment. Within the human communities that reach the respective islands, we find people with all the abilities necessary to recreate the conditions for a pleasant life. After having dealt with urgent matters concerning survival, the settlers of each island decide to organize themselves in order to set the grounds for a happy future. It quickly becomes obvious that a monetary system would simplify production and the exchange of goods and services. On Island A, an ex-banker manages to convince the community to mimic the traditional system that they were forced to leave behind due to the ship sinking. After all, that system ensured the great development in the West, didn't it? On Island B, after a long debate, it is decided that a collective money-emitting body would be created, mandated and controlled by a twofold citizen assembly. One would be elected and the other chosen at random, with short and non-renewable mandate. Surprisingly, and despite the great distance that separated them, the islands had many things in common. A wide river ran through both and separated each island in two, and you had to make a detour a long way upriver to reach the other side. The obvious solution was to build a bridge. All the elements were at hand, the urge to build it, the technology to carry the project through, the manpower and the raw material. The only thing left to decide was how the people who were going to spend their time and energy to this effort of the community were to be paid. On Island A, the banker suggested the community follow the example of all great civilized societies. They should create a fiscal system where the revenues generated would allow for such investment to become possible. Furthermore, he added, a fiscal system would be even more necessary after the bridge project, as they would soon have to look into other matters such as communication, education, healthcare, and other collective issues. Seeing that the population was at unease about the size of the bill, the banker reassured. Keep calm. If you don't have the means to pay me back the capital, I'll only request you pay the interest until you have the possibility to afford it. Hesitantly, the settlers accepted the offer, essentially because they couldn't think of any other solution. In the end, the bridge was built where the river was the most narrow, not because it was the best place, as there were two other points which would have been more suited to the needs of the population, but it was the cheapest. On Island B, a debate was held to decide whether a bridge was really the best solution, then what kind of bridge, and where they should build it so that it would simultaneously correspond with the needs of the population and least disturb the natural environment. The decision was reached democratically, the project budgeted, and the meeting body created the money necessary as the construction work went along to fund those involved in the realization of the project. Within 2 years, each island possessed a bridge, but with a slight difference. When on Island B the bridge was paid and matched the citizen needs, on Island A the population was going to have to bleed itself to pay its debts back or come to terms with itself to pay taxes indefinitely to settle the interest. Not a brilliant outlook, even if we omitted the frustration of the bridge's inadequate location. Can you see the dawn of a new world should we fully embrace what the story portrays? We are living on Island A. Money is the only way to have access for the things we need to live. How many people die each day from lack of sustenance or health care? Not that we lack either of these, simply because they don't have the money to access them. Tens of thousands. Every single day, lack of money kills over 10 times the number of victims that perished with the Twin Towers in New York in complete indifference. Can we continue to accept this once we've understood that modern money is created solely by human will? What would you feel if you had to accept letting your child die for the sole reason that you don't have enough money to pay for treatment? Right now, if we stepped out of our mental prison, we could live on Island B by simply reversing the model. Instead of letting money determine what we can or cannot do, let it do what we decide is possible and fair to do, and we determine how much money is necessary. All the elements are at hand. Having detached money from gold, we freed it from the false value that gold gave it, as well as the scarcity that condemned it. Having detached money from gold, we've opened up the possibility to finally tune the quantity of money going around with the real needs of peoples. Having detached money from gold, it has become a virtual unit created solely by human will. Having detached money from gold, an incredible opportunity for well-being and social justice is accessible to all, as well as the means to face the challenges of our time, having no limit but the things we do not want or cannot realize. It goes without saying that those who create money possess unlimited power. It's like possessing the magic lantern in the Tale of the 1,001 Nights. The person who holds it can make all their dreams a reality, and whether it's master preacher's interests that are selfish or for the good of all, the consequences, well, won't be the same. First of all, we must be aware about the threat. Indeed, we could easily take things as they come and wait until the monetary system collapses, which will obviously happen or is actually happening. When the states will be themselves insolvent, it's more than likely that international finance will propose a new system based on a global standard which will be managed by a super Sultan bank on a global level. The idea may appear to be attractive, and due to the desperate state of their condition, many of us will obviously be attracted to it. A global currency would definitely be a good solution, subject it would be managed by a truly democratic organization. However, the only international organization which could actually claim this mission is the United Nations, whose working processes are far from democratic. Make no mistake, democracy remains a great idea that humans are not able to embody yet. It's very foreseeable a superbank like IMF, the World Bank or the Bank of International Settlements will be appointed on the same logic as now because it remains in the same hands. The financial dictatorship will then be able to bluntly impose its condition upon the people, who will accept it, however, because they will be still stunned by the shock of the crisis they will have undergone head-on. That is to say, how the situation requires our vigilance. Being well informed about all that, we are now able to act on 3 levels. Let's exert constant pressure on our elected representatives and candidates in order to get the legitimate recovery of the power of money creation by the nations, and at the same time the total withdrawal of this power from the banks by abolishing the principles of double currency and fractional reserve. It means having no more than a single currency issued by a mandated public organization under democratic control. Do not have any doubt about this. You will be faced to a wall because the existing political class entirely agrees with the economical and financial ideology which is expressed by the above-mentioned logic. Without its full acceptation, the laws and treaties which draw the rules we suffer would never have been written or voted. The political class will consequently put forward the strength of these laws and treaties, or will try to confuse things with a technical jargon. Don't be impressed and always come back on the illegitimacy of these laws and treaties that drain people's sovereignty and betray the true nature of money. Have you heard about complementary local money? Well, you must be informed that a worldwide citizenship movement for local complementary money is increasing since the beginning of the century. What is it exactly? It consists in local account units in addition to the national currency. These units are issued and managed by networks of citizens whose rules are defined by them. As an example, we will now present two experiences. One is the Credito in Argentina, which allowed the Argentine people to face the crisis in 2001. The other one is the Ithaca, which has been put into circulation for ethical reasons in the small city of Ithaca in the state of New York.
Dinero, se llama crédito, es un papelito, ¿sí? Y ese papelito te sirve para comprar lo que uno desee comprar, así sea ropa, alimento.
Dos créditos, mi amor, muchas gracias. La gente se vuelca acá, en principio vende sus cosas usadas, su ropa, su calzado. Otra gente que vende artículos como licuadoras o videograbadoras o televisores, lo que tengan. Comienzan así, lo cambian por alimento.
Muy bien, gracias. ¿Tenés bolsita?
Sí, me parece.
Bueno.
La economía en Argentina está quebrada y esto es una economía paralela. Nos manejamos con nuestros créditos porque no tenemos los pesos, no hay peso en Argentina. Entonces este es nuestro peso, nuestro trabajo.
Lo que hemos sencillamente generado es una herramienta.
We simply generated a tool of exchange. You can call it money, but that wasn't our intention. We simply use it to represent the value of work.
De lo que yo hago o de lo que tú haces.
Ah, no. 7. Gracias.
Lo hicimos siempre.
It's what we've always done. When I had a job, they paid me in money, and with this money, I could buy bread from the baker. I was bartering. I bartered my work for bread. I used money as a tool.
Y utilizaba una herramienta, que era el dinero. Hoy hago exactamente.
Today, I do exactly the same. I work, and in exchange, they give me a ticket that's worth the value of my work. And with this ticket, I go to a bartering fair and buy the same bread. I exchange my work for bread. The only difference is the tool. Previously, we had the peso. When it disappeared, we asked ourselves, what can we do? And we invented a new currency. Simply put, we said, does this have a value? Do you trust the credit that I'm offering you? Do you agree that it's worth what I'm telling you it's worth? Do you give it credibility? If yes, okay, you'll accept it.
Aparte de tomártelo como un trabajo, esto es una gran familia. ¿Entendés? Cuando no venís porque te duele algo, ya te están llamando porque no viniste. Y eso es lindo, te hace sentir bien, te hace sentir que no estás solo, ¿no?
Yo tengo, mi esposo trabaja en la construcción, hace casas. Mi hijo está estudiando Derecho, es estudiante, así que no tiene trabajo.
Ella le paga la facultad al hijo con esto, le ayuda mucho en la casa.
O sea, con lo que yo trabajo acá en el nodo, llevo todo lo que necesito para mi casa, para comer, para vestirnos, para artículos de limpieza, todo. Y con el ingreso de mi esposo puedo pagar lo que se hace con dinero que acá no se puede hacer.
La figura del banco que nosotros tenemos es una empresa.
We commonly see the bank as a business that makes money with money. But in the barter network, we see the bank as an entity that produces goods and services through the access to a tool called credit. But we aren't going to build a new financial system. Our credits are loaned without interest. We don't say like the IMF does, I'll lend you 100, but you must pay back 150. No, we lend 100 and we say, pay back 100 in goods, services, or skills that the network needs.
Con el crédito que recibimos de la gente del PAR, hemos trabajado y tenemos casi 50 personas trabajando, con 30.000 créditos que se los dio, de los cuales hemos gastado 18 y hemos generado 50. Esta red permite que nosotros manejemos nuestro propio dinero a través de la producción. O sea, nosotros producimos y podemos ayudar también. Y fíjese usted que nosotros, a la transformación de esta prenda, nosotros nos permite fabricar, que ustedes si lo quieren ir a ver abajo lo van a poder firmar después, fabricar factura, churro y pan para los comedores escolares y para los comedores de los chiquitos. O sea, nos permite ejercer la solidaridad que realmente es para lo que es la cooperativa.
But I also met people who invented a currency for political reasons. In the United States, there is more than 500 communities using a local money. Ithaca is one of them.
In an economically strong country like the United States with a strong dollar, a currency that's used all over the globe, why should we have local currencies, and why are local currencies spreading and popular in this country? I think they serve a really important need that is exactly a part of being a strong global economy. And so this applies around the world, all the interconnected countries. I think as we become more global, as we become more interconnected, as people do more and more shopping on the internet, as people ship things around the world, our sense of connection to where we live and how we live is lost.
Can I taste some cane apples, please? Just a little, Athena. There you go. Thank you. You make community. We back Ithaca Hours with our labor and our goodwill. That's really important to me. And Ithaca Hours turned my life around in a way, because I could trade for skills that I can't sell, like psychic readings or something. So I got Ithaca Hours, and I was able to, when we didn't have any money, I was able to feed my kids using trading for Ithaca Hours.
We can keep American dollars in the community, but we have far less control over where our American dollars go once we try to keep them in our community. This shows that we're truly supporting our local businesses and our local service providers, because you cannot use this particular currency outside of our community.
That's 2/4 hours, which is $5, and $1 American dollar. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
By calling the currency an hour, an Ithaca hour, it connects the exchange and this mechanism of exchange that we're using back to time, and ultimately back to the source of value, which is the people involved and what they're bringing to the exchange. So a local currency has all these sort of eye-opening benefits. It makes us think about where value comes from in exchange. It makes us think about dollars, because, again, dollars are sort of this thoughtless, anonymous thing that we exchange. We don't think about where they come from, why are they valuable. But when you present someone with this new piece of paper called an Ithaca hour that has fancy colors on it and beautiful drawings, and we say, well, this is money, it makes people think, well, what is money?
It was started about 10 years ago, and the foundation was to foster strength in the agricultural communities, because food is, in essence, like one of our primary needs. We need to have food. So it's a good place to start with something as basic as that.
If you come around here, I can show you the Ithaca Hour Bank.
We have an active board of directors who meets monthly to deal with issues of promotion and distribution of the currency. Right now, the board of directors has a whole stash of local currency printed, just like a central bank of any country would have a stash of currency printed and in reserves. And that currency is brought into circulation when a person calls in or fills out the form that says, I am able to do whatever task in exchange for local currency.
The closest we come to being a banking system is that we make loans. The organization also gives grants to community organizations, to other community organizations. So on that small scale, we do provide financing for local entrepreneurs.
Just these two examples cannot show the great diversity of currencies which are blooming here and there. But in many aspects, they illustrate the need to put the money back to its rightful place and use it according to its true nature. In all cases, and beyond the often microscopic dimension of these experiments, we can see the seeds of the incredible transformation of human thought and society. It could appear as an easy-going game only, but by playing it, humans can recover their dignity by learning to reinvent the money while taking into account the common good and to ensure that democracy is something other than a word. Now it's possible to go even further in linking political and local actions. If we fail to obtain a change of the rules and treaties allowing the reappropriation of the power of money creation by the nations, at least we can put pressure on our elected representatives in order to issue at national level of a complementary currency whose purpose would be to finance everything that could improve the quality of life, following the same principle as on Island B. This would make possible what is not possible at the moment for the simple reason that it is not profitable enough or because there is a lack of money. However, the challenge is far to be won, as regaining the power on money by one way or another will not be enough. This recovery can only be the symbol of the one humans must undertake on themselves if they really want a world of peace and sufficiency. Just imagine for a second. Here we are. The nation has recovered the magic lamp. Suddenly, everything becomes possible, as if individually we came to gain a bingo without any limit. Will it not give to all our whims and desires free rein, while yesterday they were retained by an insufficient purchasing power? What does restrain us for the time being? It is the lack of money, isn't it? Isn't it the attainment of our desires and projects not depending on the money we have? Let's be honest. Can we admit that usually, when we want something, our single reflex is to look at whether we can afford it or not? Where is our freedom and self-awareness in this matter? Have they not been kidnapped by our purse, which ultimately decides for us? If money is managing our individual life, is it surprising that finance is managing the world? Can we rebel against institutions which, after all, just reflect what is happening in each of us? If we really want a world of peace, sufficiency, and equity, we must individually initiate the change we want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world, said Gandhi. Achieve that is like touching the heart of the challenge of our time, like touching the inner revolution which consists in being able to individually and collectively decide on our future, not with the money we can get, but from a questioning. What do we want? What do we try to express through what we want? To what do we contribute? What dynamic do we feed? What is the impact on the nature and resources? Is there an alternative? In brief, all the questions which would make us free and responsible beings rather than remaining the slaves of our desires, only restrained by the artificially orchestrated scarcity of money. What is underlined in the monetary power is much more than a purchasing power. It's our power of being, our power to be something else than puppets manipulated by our desires, stimulated by advertising and marketing tools. The power of money creation is extremely symbolic. It is not insignificant to note that both major crises we are facing are expressed, on one hand, in the money which reflects the symbolic wealth, and on the other hand, in ecology, which is the real wealth. It is not insignificant either to realize that as per our existing way of thinking, the recommended cures are contradictory. Economic growth on one side, and moderation on the other side. This contradiction is perfectly reflecting the one that lives in us. It is an invitation to us to ensure congruency. If we fail, we are condemned to wander in a more and more violent and unbearable world. Through money, we are urgently called to a conscience revolution. We do believe the deepest root of our problems is fear. If someone falls in the water not knowing how to swim, what will he do? Thrust by fear, he will struggle, moving in an uncoordinated manner, hoping it will maintain him at the surface. But this agitation will merely hasten his end. It is said that fear is not a good advisor, which is true. If trust had been stronger in this person, he would have realized that his body is lighter than water and that he could have let himself be carried. Undoubtedly, we are not conscious of how much our fears drive us, simply because it is an emotion that we do not like and have learned to disconnect from, thanks to the frantic and often incongruent acts which occupy our more and more hectic days. Nevertheless, more than ever, we are like the person drowning himself, doing the opposite of what would be necessary. If we were ready to look deeper, we would acknowledge that there is fear even if we don't feel it. Fear of dying, fear of missing, fear of not being loved, fear of not being up to snuff, fear of being criticized, judged, and many others. These fears come from the feeling of insecurity generated by so many of life's unexpected turns of events. Sooner or later, when all goes well, an event shakes our house of cards, and here we are, facing our vulnerability, as well as these fears that we want to avoid so much. Thus, life appears to us as dangerous, cruel, unjust, and trapped by the sense of lack within us, because let's admit it, we always lack something to feel completely happy. We believe that there is not enough for everyone, and therefore we must fight for our place in the sun. This is what has driven our Western culture to build this foundation on the belief that happiness is only possible if one has everything one needs, in the sense of what it takes to feel safe. That is to suggest that what we have determines our chances of being happy. This model of thinking, that currently dominates the collective unconscious in the world, is what I call scarcity or survival consciousness. It is fear, most of the time unconscious, that determines our thoughts, our actions, and therefore our systems. It pushes us to spontaneously accumulate to feel safe and to fight to be among the strongest, a prerequisite to access the resources and services that will give us the feeling of being safe. This, translated into economic theory, lays the foundation of the two main pillars: growth, having always more, promise of happiness, and competition, to be among the best because there is not enough for all. But then, we may well have immense knowledge, important means of production, and gadgets that we don't know how to improve further. We are nevertheless drowning. We have reached the time when we urgently need to understand that our actions are killing us. It's time to stop fighting against life, but to just go with it. This is the big challenge. Make trust stronger than fear. What? At a time when land resources are scarce and where the world's population has never been so important? Believe it, Earth's resources are not scarce. It is our ways of production and consumption that make them insufficient. They are abundant enough to enable mankind to live in sufficiency if we abandon this illusionary and societal model of racing for possession. Today, we have infinitely more than our grandparents and great-grandparents. Are we happier? Do we feel safer? No. So stop. It is time to expose the illusion of the American dream. It is time to change our pattern of thought and to enter what I call the abundance or life consciousness. Abundance not in the sense that there would be indefinitely everything we want, but in the sense of the person drowning who becomes aware that all is there for him to be safe.
C'est ce que les crises de notre siècle.
This is what the
nous
crisis
invitent
of
à
our
réaliser.
century invite us to understand. All is there to allow life to express itself and flourish, even if we don't see it, even if we do not understand. Only fear prevents us from shifting from fear to trust. And shifting from fear to trust is to accept, to surrender to life's intelligence, to understand how we are profoundly part of it, that death itself is one of its aspects, a passage undoubtedly mysterious, but which doesn't imply an end or a defeat. It is to realize that we must settle our ways of existence according to what the planet has to offer without damaging it, instead of always wanting more. It is to meet other people's differences not as an obstacle to knock down, but as an asset that enriches thought, which is a prerequisite for the exercise of direct democracy. It is realizing that in working together we can benefit from each and every talent, and that by standing by one another we're immensely stronger and loving, while fighting and competition can only be synonymous with violence and war. It's putting the warrior within us to sleep and awakening the gardener. It is to no longer consider the earth as a prey to cut up, but as a garden to farm. The revolution to be conducted comes down to this: to operate a shift from the current system where fear justifies the accumulation and competition, and where money is the ideal tool for selection and power, to reconcile humanity where trust in life inspires the need for responsible and fair sharing, and where cooperation is recognized as the most powerful lever for peace and progress. Here, money becomes a tool for distribution and exchange to produce and share the riches of merchant goods as well as non-merchant goods, chosen through a process of reflection and debate. Okay, Matt, you say, but what does it take to move from fear to trust? Two things, as simple and as difficult as no longer struggling when one is drowning. One, to become aware of our fears, as they are unconscious most of the time, and two, when one can see them, to choose to trust instead. This choice changes our outlook on things, and our outlook changes the world. These words are easy to say, are they not? But to assimilate them is another matter, as they go against what our habits and culture have inscribed in our genes as of highest value. Yet it is this dynamic that will restore our source of sovereignty, sovereignty whose symbol will translate into our economy in the recovery of the power to create money. As for now, we're at this point of the passage, most uncomfortable, I agree, but not the less exciting, where anything is possible. No need to spell it out for you. The pattern of survival is still deeply rooted in us, and the road to reconcile humanity and respected Earth is likely to be still very long. Everything depends on our individual and collective ability to recognize our fears and have the courage, because it takes courage, to tame them rather than flee. This is the price to pay to build trust in order for humans to liberate their true potential. Now, I have good news. This revolution is becoming visible. While the financial dictatorship is increasingly insolent and binding, it is taking shape and rising a vast global citizen movement, bearer of human and ecological values. I believe that humanity has grown enough to be able to undergo a revolution with intelligence and heart rather than by weapons. It is for each of us to prove it. It is possible that there isn't enough time for us to avoid the iceberg. Things will then be more difficult because we may find ourselves in front of empty storefronts or without money, in such a state of disorganization that panic might ensue. So what? Will we still have enough presence of mind to see that we still have a choice? That we don't have to give in to panic, knowing it only promises violence and suffering? That we can choose to be supportive and sharing, although there is little to share? We can do it, because we live this extraordinary turning point between the era of survival, now complete, and the one of life we do not yet know how to address, but whose signs are becoming more visible. Caterpillar, butterfly, what's going on there in the metamorphosis? We're getting there. The perspective of the transition, as a stranger fast approaching us, makes us quite legitimately feel scared. But if we are led by the confident certainty that the butterfly is already in the caterpillar, we can put all our energy in revealing, whatever the cost, the greatness and love that exists deep within us and that is only masked by our fears. Don't you feel the call to fly? If we believe that we're ready, then we'll do it.